So let's actually define intensity, because I know you and I both speak about, I always say, like, please don't write me letters, but, I always talk about Orange Theory and F45 and these classes where it seems intense, but maybe not quite in the physiological way that you're describing. So let's actually just put some definitions around what we're talking about when we're talking about intensity. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've gotten letters about the F45 and Orange Theory, even from the companies themselves, trying to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at those kinds of classes, and it's not just those two particular areas, but it's all the gym type classes that are now being marketed to women 40 plus or in the midlife, where you think, okay, I'm going to go for an hour, I'm going to smash myself, and it's using some weight, so maybe I'm getting some strength training and I'm increasing my heart rate. But when we're looking at it, you cannot hold the appropriate intensity for that hour. Because when we're looking at the scale of intensity, we have the zone 1, which is kind of the resting, really low, just walking, really kind of dog walking, leisurely style. And then we have the zone 2 that everyone talks about, where you can hold it and your breath is elevated. And we say that's around the 60% heart rate max. Then we get into this moderate intensity, which a lot of people are like, oh, zone 3, zone 4. And this is where we say it is too hard to be easy to get the adaptations we want from those lower intensities. But it's too easy to be hard to get the adaptations we want from the higher zones. So we're in this moderate, and it doesn't really do much for us when we get to our midlife. If we are looking to train for something that we are doing that's more endurance, like a 10K run or something like that, you might have to spend time there. But for general fitness, that intensity makes you feel smashed, and it is a very strong metabolic and central nervous system stress. But it isn't a high enough threat, as we say, to the entire system to invoke a change of let's make ourselves really super robust to that stress. When we're in peri and post menopause, we need that upper end and that really significant lower end, because now we're trying to find an external stress from exercise that's going to signal the body to adapt how hormones used to support. So we're looking at metabolic control, we're looking at brain health, we're looking at cardiovascular and blood pressure combinations. We're looking at how we're invoking muscle regeneration and muscle growth and the conversation to reduce this visceral fat and reduce the body fat accumulation. If we stay in that moderate intensity zone, we don't have a strong enough stress to invoke those signals. And that's why we see so many problems when women are like, but I go to Orange Theory 4 times a week, or I do F45, or I go to Barry's boot camp, and I'm not getting any results. I'm just getting really tired, and I'm tired but wired, and I just don't know what to do.
And it's, we're calling out companies, but this could also just be jogging on the treadmill 4 to 5 times a week. It could be on the Stairmaster or the elliptical or the, on in your spin class at your local gym as well. So these are areas where, and I would love for you to maybe expand on this a little bit. That zone 3, 4 tends to be a bit more catabolic, right? Because you're just using up glycogen, like muscle glycogen. But when you're in that zone, those higher, even the polar ends, so zone 1 and even zone 2 and then zone 5, and then some people will even argue that there's a zone 6, but we'll just, for the argument, just say that there's a zone 5 right now. Those are anabolic, right? So there's zone 1 and 2 are very much recovery. So I never get very hungry after a walk or after cleaning up my kitchen, or even just, a light, like a brisk walk in the neighborhood, a weighted vest, that kind of thing. And the same is true when I am doing high intensity interval training. I'm not really hungry afterwards. Whereas when I do find, and I will, with the spirit of transparency and honesty, there is a step class that I really, because I am a step, like I grew up, teaching
with
steps.
Step aerobics.
Step aerobics. So I love, it's like, I just have so much fun doing it. And I know I'm in like zone 3 and 4. But I'm hungry. Like I always notice I'm like just a little hungrier after that class. It doesn't quell my hunger the way that maybe a zone 1, 2, weighted vest walk might. So I think that it's also important to also distinguish the different outcomes on the body as you've been describing. But one is more catabolic, which is at 3-4. And then we tend to, as you're saying, like we tend to drive up cortisol, and this like elevated cortisol, sort of chronically elevated inflammatory, well, I guess chronically it's inflammatory, can drive up the belly weight and the things that women will often complain about in midlife. Like, I don't know where I'm working out 5 days a week. I don't know why I have this midsection that won't budge.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'll be full disclosure too. I still love going out and riding my bike for hours at a time. Right. Or doing bike intervals that are a little bit longer than what a sprint interval would be. But I don't do it all the time. And I'm sure you don't do your step aerobics all the time. So there is a time and a place. It's just people shouldn't put all their eggs in that one basket, because we do have to think about, the soul food and all the things that make people happy. But when we're looking at the quality, we want to really look at quality over quantity. So people are also stressed for time, and they're like, well, I need to go fit this class in, or I need to go jump on the bike or go for a run or something like that. And so they're really stressed around, I have to do it for 45 minutes. But if you were to look at the quality and really focus on the proper polarizing intensity of 1 minute on, 2 minutes off, or something to that effect, you get a really solid workout in 25 to 30 minutes. That is going to do more for your body than the 45 to 60 minutes. And it's really, really hard for so many women in this age bracket to wrap their heads around, because we have grown up in the whole step aerobics and 90-minute fat burning classes and more is better. But we look from a physiological and hormonal response, it's not better. It's let's look at the quality and the intensity to get the responses that we want that doesn't overdrive our sympathetic nervous system and make us in that tired but wired state.
Yeah, it's the dose, right? It's the dose. It's the dose that makes the poison. It's like, you can have a slice of cake and you'll be fine. If you have the whole cake, you're not going to be fine, Right. So, okay, so let's talk about high intensity interval training. So let's define that. So when we're thinking about that, is that a function of maximum heart rate? How are you defining high intensity? Is it like Norwegians, like the 4x4s? Is it Tabata? How do you like to look at high intensity training?
High intensity and sprint interval are two different things. Like sprint interval training is within high intensity interval training. And it's really hard to use heart rate if we're looking at specific intervals for some people, because there's a lag in the time it takes for the metrics to be caught by a wearable. I like to use rating of perceived exertion. And people can kind of more understand when I say on a scale of 1 to 10 for high intensity interval training. For the intervals, we want you to be working about an 8. And that interval could be anywhere from 1 to 6 minutes. And then when the recovery time is variable as well. Are we looking for more lactate production? Maybe we're doing 8 at 4 to 5 minutes. Are we looking at more power-based stuff? Maybe we're doing 1 minute that's at closer to a 9. So the intensity in there and the variable recovery is what makes the metabolic outcomes. When we're looking at sprint interval training, this is a completely different and a subset of high intensity interval training. So sprint interval training is 30 seconds or less, as hard as you possibly can go. So on the scale of 1 to 10, you might be 10 or 11. And then the recovery is 2 to 4 minutes, because we're looking for complete metabolic and central nervous system recovery, because it is a really maximal stress on the body. And you might only be able to do 2 to 3 when you first start. And ideally, you don't want to do more than 6. So there is that subset, and both of them are very effective at changing body comp, but they do it in different mechanisms in different ways. So we're looking at high intensity interval training, which is a little bit less intense and has variable recovery. This is more of a conversation that we're getting better blood pressure control, because we're having more shear stress on the blood vessels. We are having more myokines released from the skeletal muscle to say, hey, we don't need to store visceral fat. We're also producing lactate, which is a preferred fuel for the brain. So we are able to help with the brain metabolism misstep that's occurring in perimenopause. When we look specifically at sprint interval training, this is a very strong stress that will cause more of an epigenetic response over time, where we're actually changing the way that the muscle fiber is responding. We're able to use more ATP, CP. We're able to generate more of what we call our GLUT4 proteins, which are kind of like the doors that open without insulin to pull glucose in. So we get better glucose homeostasis over time. And both of them are very effective at shutting down that visceral fat gain.
Amazing. Okay, so just for the listener, ATP-CP is the ATP cross-creatine phosphocreatine system. So this is this is the energy that's often reserved in the muscle for very high intensity, the sprint interval training that Stacey is describing here as well. And so let's do, if you can give maybe an example of high tech and low tech. If someone has maybe access to a gym, what would be a piece of equipment that they might think about doing high intensity interval training on? Is there a preferred? Is it a stationary bike? Is it a treadmill? Do you care? Do you care if it's weight bearing or non-weight bearing? Or if someone doesn't have access to a gym, would it be just finding like a local high school with a track and seeing, timing yourself and seeing how much distance you can cover?
It's really dependent on the individual, because there are some people who hate running, and then there are some people who absolutely love it. And then there are joint issues that come into play, especially when we start getting into perimenopause. So it's whatever mode of activity that will allow you to hit those intensities. If we're in a gym situation for sprint interval training, I really like people to use an assault bike, because it's really hard and it has a good timer and you feel it, or a rowing erg, because then it's a total body as well. Treadmill's harder, because you have to get it up to speed and you have to be very comfortable running super fast and then being able to jump off, which isn't that safe. So I prefer using an erg that gives you more control over it and also monitors power. If we're outside and you don't run, it could be stairs. You're really pushing to get up the stairs a lot faster. It could be walking up an incline. If you have access to kettlebell or something like that in your garage, you can use kettlebell overhead swings or snatch as your high intensity work. We can even look at battle ropes, either at your house or at the gym, because those also can really invoke a total body high intensity interval as well. So it really does depend on where you are and what you have available and what you find you can maximally put forth the effort without hurting yourself or getting mentally like, I can't do this.
And frequency so high intensity interval training, how often are you looking to do that? And would you categorize sprint interval training as a subcategory of HIIT, of high intensity interval training? And if yes, how many times would you like people to be doing that per week or bi-weekly?
Yeah, so sprint interval, maybe twice a week. And then with one high intensity interval session. But if you're like, the sprint's too hard right now, I can't get to that intensity, I'm not robust enough, that's fine. Then we look to doing 2 of the high intensity interval trainings that are a little bit lower in the intensity with that variable recovery.
Great.